ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be a great evening with General Brunson. David Lee, come on.
Today, I have the honor of introducing our distinguished speaker. Xavier T. Brunson is the commander of United Nations Command, Combined Forces Command, and United States Forces Korea. As a general officer, General Brunson has served in numerous staff and command positions in conventional and special operations forces. General Brunson was commissioned as an infantry officer upon graduation from Hampton University with a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science. He also earned a Master of Arts in Human Resource Development from Webster University and a Master of Science in National Security Strategic Studies from the United States Army War College. General Brunson's notable civic awards include Omega Psi Phi's brother Dr. Julian Haywood Gamma Epsilon Founders Leadership Award and the United States National Park Service's Trailblazer Award from the Charles Young Buffalo Soldiers National Monument. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome General Xavier Brunson.
Thank you, David. Welcome, General.
Hey, thank you very much. And David, and I at risk of asking something crazy, because Mr. Maxwell was kind enough to remind everybody to mute their mics. I'm sure somebody will raise their hands and let me know if you can't hear me at all. We too have had some technical challenges here today, trying to align my bald head up with the camera so that I'm looking at you all, and trying to move the remarks from my computer screen to this handheld version that I have before me now. So if I'm looking down, it's not I don't want to engage with you. It's that my old eyes have to read this fine print that's been put before me today. And I look forward to not only having this great opportunity to address you all this morning, but also the opportunity to answer some of your questions as best I might. So thank you again to ICAS for this invitation. I find us simpatico in a lot of ways, in that we both think much about the Korean-American relationship, the ROK-US alliance, and all things that are going on in Seoul right now. Every day, we do similar things across my three jobs, my three hats, my three commands. We think on the problems of Northeast Asia. And I'm honored to be the commander of the Tri-Command currently. And I'm absolutely honored to stand alongside the Korean people as we work to ensure peace, stability, and the success of all those in our region. At the center of the ROK-US alliance, though, is really the human bond. We oftentimes talk about interoperability. That can be human, that can be procedural, that can be technical. That human bond that was born in fire, as I said in the ceremony yesterday, has become the light of the world in terms of alliances. For 70 plus years working in alliance here on the peninsula. Today, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, or DPRK, continues to advance its military capabilities. And just in the past 2 years, they've claimed a tactical nuclear warhead and tested ICBMs that likely will improve their ability to deliver nuclear payloads to targets to include North America. And these are not abstract developments that have occurred. They're designed to project power, to drive wedges between allies, to coerce neighbors, and to alter regional dynamics in their favor. At the same time, the regime is using cyberspace to further aim to state power. Not only that, but to circumvent sanctions that are in place. They've leveraged their cyber-enabled theft to further their illicit gains, to fund its weapons programs, and to mitigate the impact of those same sanctions. This modern asymmetric power projection is low in cost, highly deniable, and deeply disruptive. Layered onto this is a shifting network of partnerships. Pyongyang's ties with Russia have deepened. Last year, DPRK troops trained and deployed alongside Russian forces in Ukraine. In return, they've gained valuable battlefield insights, political cover, and access to advanced military technology. And I would also mention, as an aside here, our research, development, testing, and evaluation for them by virtue of material that they've received has been conservatively cut in half. They haven't had to develop because they've got Soviet Russian materials on their shores now, which they're using to effect. The China DPRK relationship is in a period of thawing or warming after a strained time period. Chinese business people, diplomats, and journalists are once again allowed to enter the DPRK, and trade volumes are climbing. So DPRK's diplomatic space is broadening. So what do we do about it? Kim Jong-un's focus is on strengthening control at home, nuclear development, and regime survival. DPRK dismantled its inter-Korean organizations and formally recognized two sovereign states on the Korean Peninsula. This wasn't just a political signal, this was a strategic shift for the DPRK. The connection for inter-Korean dialogue and engagement are not in place at the moment. Sustained, meaningful diplomacy with the Republic of Korea is not in its current policy designs, and yet deterrence still holds. And that's not by chance. That's because we have built a posture, a presence, and a partnership that denies the DPRK the conditions to escalate without consequence. The alliance between the United States and Republic of Korea is not theoretical. It's integrated and conducts operations, activities, and investments routinely. As a commander of UN Command, I enforce the terms of the armistice, an agreement that remains absolutely essential. The Korean War armistice is entering its 72nd year. It has held longer than anyone expected it would, but it has been held by accident. It's endured because of commitment. It is endured because of diplomacy. It is endured because of our alliances. And despite recent challenges, it's important that we reflect on history today. 1,200 formal meetings have been held between the UN Command and the Korean People's Army since 1953. These channels allow us to de-escalate incidences, establish facts, and buy time when tensions rise. The UN Command also brings together 18 member states in a multinational framework that lends legitimacy, capability, stability, and deterrence in Korea and the broader region. This multilateralism, action, it functions and it works. In Japan, under the UN Command Government of Japan Status of Forces Agreement, we maintain access to 7 bases used by multiple partner nations for operations related to regional security, such as sanctions monitoring in the East China Sea. This matters because if conflict comes, we won't have time to build the team, and in Korea it is. We stand alongside a remarkable group of nations from NATO, ASEAN, and AUKUS, and each is absolutely critical to our success. Along with UN Command, the U.S. ROC Combined Forces Command remains one of the most integrated bilateral commands in the world. CFC's motto, Pachi Kapshida, meaning we go together, is more than a motto. It's a binding principle. It shows up in our combined division, in our targeting cells, in our shared mission command, and interoperability exercises like Freedom Shield and Ulchi Freedom Shield, and in our joint fires architecture. CFC has demonstrated remarkable achievements in fostering a unique, integrated defense structure between our two nations. Its success lies in its ability to evolve in response to the shifting dynamics of regional security, economic development, and military advancements. It continues to exemplify the strength of the ROC-US alliance, solidifying its legacy of cooperation while adapting to future challenges. The United States Forces Korea is the physical manifestation of the United States' ironclad commitment to the U.S. ROC Mutual Defense Treaty. The U.S. continues to put forces where necessary to support that treaty and ensure that we can contribute to the other two commands. The reality is what I also hope to bring is a unique perspective. In Korea, it's the one place on the planet with the only forward-based, forward-deployed field army, 8th Army, along with CFC. And it stands ready to execute reception, staging, onward movement, and integration of forces necessary to conduct large-scale combat operations. These facts are of particular importance when we affirm that the missions here and our mission, period, is not just static defense. It's not about digging in and waiting. It's a strategic, dynamic presence and deterrent that's forward and incredibly capable. Deterrence here relies on readiness, our posture, and our partnerships. In response to the evolving security landscape, our alliances and friendships become more critical than ever. The trilateral partnership between the United States, the Republic of Korea, and Japan is growing beyond simply confidence-building measures. It's maturing into a cornerstone of regional stability and a significant means of imposing cost on potential adversaries. We continue to actively look for opportunities to bolster this relationship and fully live up to the commitments made at the 2023 Camp David Summit. In building on the momentum from previous key leader engagements like the 2024 Tri-Ministerial and Trilateral Chiefs of Defense meetings. Our trilateral relationship is already focused on several key areas: consistent key leader engagements, the groundbreaking DPRK missile early warning data sharing, increasingly complex exercises, and training and frank discussions on the evolving threats posed by DPRK and other regional actors. DPRK's continued launches of a significant number of missiles underscores the vital importance of our three countries sharing DPRK missile warning data in near real time. This isn't just about technical capability. It's about demonstrating benefits each nation derives from cooperating together. It's a clear signal that we are unified in our response and committed to regional security. We share a common threat, and our cooperation together helps provide a credible deterrent to the DPRK and other regional challenges. As both our existing alliances, the U.S.-ROC and U.S.-Japan alliances, work to address those provocations, advancing operational level trilateral cooperation, and understand fully that it will be critical to ensuring our efforts on the military side are fully aligned. Modernization and coalition integration are also critical if we want to sustain deterrence over time, not just today, but in the years and decades ahead. They represent the future-proofing of our alliance and our ability to respond to evolving threats, ensuring we remain a credible and capable deterrent force in a dynamic geopolitical landscape. This isn't simply about keeping pace. It's for us about setting the pace. It also means telling our story better. Because the truth is, the alliance is not just about what we defend against, it's about what we stand for. At the same time that we talk about deterrence, we also have to discuss assurances, which are closely linked. It's about consistently assuring our friends, partners, and allies in the region that when called upon, we will arrive with combat credible, fully equipped, and ready forces. We expect the same assurances from our friends, partners, and allies. We seek peace and stand for regional stability, not as an outsider, but as integrated partners. And we stand for an Indo-Pacific where rules matter, where sovereignty is respected, and where conflict is not the first option. And this is where institutions like ICAS come in, because our discussions on how to seek peace start in classrooms, in research, and in dialogue. It's built when we listen, when we exchange ideas, when we build habits of cooperation that endure, even as governments change. Your insights are particularly relevant as we mark the 75 years since the Korean War began. Let's remember that deterrence and diplomacy are not opposites, they're partners. One prevents conflict, the other prepares for peace. Our future will not be shaped by one moment or one leader. It will be shaped by the choices we make together day after day and year after year. So let's keep choosing dialogue, let's keep choosing cooperation, and let's keep choosing deterrence, not as a path to conflict, but as a clear path away from it. What I've discussed with you today is how I view my region and my role within the Tri-Commands. But I want to ask ICAS, what am I missing? What things are being discussed in your organization that would allow us to see things in a new way? I know one thing for certain, I can't read minds. I want to hear your thoughts and perspectives on the security situation on the Korean Peninsula and the region. I look forward to your questions. Thank you, and kachi kapshi.
Thank you, General. That was a great thesis. Before we get into Q&A session, let me make a short comment. ICAS is not an agent of any government or foreign principles. There's no foreign funds involved in ICAS activities. That said, David Maxwell, I can see you. You want to go first? Go ahead, David.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, good evening and good morning, General Brunson. And let me offer regards from General Cleveland and Wade Ishimoto, who I recently saw. And they said to pass on regards to you. And we know that you're doing a great job there. I want to ask you about, and you stressed this in your talk about the regional aspect of your three commands. Not just on the Korean Peninsula. And your recent congressional testimony with Admiral Paparo really indicated close cooperation and collaboration. In fact, it's the best I've heard in really 4 decades on the peninsula. And so can you describe how forces assigned to the ROC US CFC could be employed for crises and contingencies throughout the Asia Pacific region? And I'm talking about US and Korean forces. And how do you anticipate mitigating the challenge of dual apportioned forces when there are simultaneous or near simultaneous contingencies in the region? And this is, of course, particularly sensitive because the term strategic flexibility is one that, puts a chill in our allies. And they fear that strategic flexibility means abandonment. And so if you could address how you prevent that feeling of abandonment and, as you said, stress reassurance to our commitment. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
First, I was remiss and would ask and indulge you for your forgiveness to all those who have joined this discussion today. Thank you for being here. I hear my mother speaking in the back of my head right now, saying you didn't tell anybody thank you for showing up today. So thank you all for showing up today and for being here and for the fruit conversation that we're going to have. So again, please forgive me for not having done that. I am immensely sorry for being rude. In answer to your question, I want to tackle that in a couple of ways. First, to talk about the region. I think a lot of times when conversations are had, and I'm just talking from my own experience, both with testimony, both closed and open conversations I've had with leadership. It's important to put a map between people when you begin to have a conversation so that they understand the immensity of the Indo-Pacific. But not only that, they begin to understand where we're postured currently. And sometimes I think that we in the Department of Defense, and not speaking for the Secretary or others, but it's really a military idea where we think that if we talk about how good we have it, we're asking for credit or we're seeking credit. What I would offer instead is that we ought to acknowledge where we have posture, where we have friends, where we have allies, where we have partnerships, because those are our asymmetric advantage. One need to only look north, and what you see is an alliance in quotes, okay? It's an alliance of convenience of some authoritarian colluders who have come together in all auspices, sort of pooling their capabilities and ability to survive things that would individually destroy their countries. Sanctions being an example. Our president has just recently, approved for additional sanctions to be placed on Russia. So sanctions in and of themselves have great effect on these nations. But the point truly being, look at a map when you have a discussion. Maps were made for a reason. And the same reason today, to understand our contemporary environment, we've got to look at a map. When you look at a map, certain things become very evident to you. So in the case Dave mentions, a potential US v China, if that were to come about, and we're not looking for that, who has better posture than we do in Korea? And that's a question we have to ask ourselves. But posture itself, the way that we're postured and acknowledging posture is simply to say that we have the right capabilities with the right authorities in the right position to achieve the objectives set forward for us in policy. And those are the decisions that are in the offing right now. And I think all nations understand those things. We've got to be absolutely clear about what it is we're trying to accomplish, especially with our allies. And I think that one of the things that hampers some of the efforts here as it relates to the peninsula is there's been some political unrest. But as I explained to Congress when I was back, the Korean system is working as it should. They are following their system and their process, and it's working. We've, constitutional court justices, all these things have occurred because that's what their system requires. So when we talk strategic flexibility, I think that is a thing that we all want, that we might be able to ensure peace through strength requires us to sometimes go in other places. The immensity that faces the globe in our region is huge. If you look in the East Sea from the Korean Peninsula, there are incursions by the Russians into the Cadiz. If you look in the West Sea, there is Chinese incursion in and around the NLL. Those things are being reported continually. They're in the press. But when you look at them in abstract and you don't look at a map, then you don't understand why strategic flexibility is absolutely necessary. I could sit on the peninsula right here at beautiful Camp Humphreys and not go out and see soldiers within the GCC, not going up to the JSA, not going to Seoul to meet with your excellent chairman of ROC Military, or meeting with the MINDEF or the MOFA. I could do all those things from right here, but that's not demonstrating any kind of operational or tactical flexibility. We have to move where the problems are that we might ameliorate them. In my mind, what I try to get our folks to understand is strategic flexibility means that we've got to be flexible in our thinking, we've got to be flexible in our planning, and we absolutely have to be flexible in our execution, because there is the one good thing that we have here that would allow us to demonstrate strategic flexibility is a strong ROC military. And that's unlike any place else in the world. You have one of the 10 largest armies in this region is right here, and we're partnered with them. They are our ally and have been for over 70 years. Dave, did that get at your question?
Yeah, David, go
Yes,
ahead.
yeah.
Follow-up question.
Yeah, no, thank you. That does. And I just, and I certainly agree. And I think, your words really require, continual emphasis, because from what I read in the press and talk to Korean colleagues, there's just a lot of fear about abandonment. And, and so, and we know that's not the case. I mean, your remarks are clear, but we've really got to overcome that. And I think that is, it really requires not just the U.S., but Korea, Japan, Philippines, all of our allies to take a holistic view of the region, because every threat is interrelated. As you said, China, Russia, and North Korea, they have their colluding alliance, based on fear, weakness, desperation, and envy. They envy us. So I just urge you to continue to beat that drum to make sure that our allies know that we have the strategic resolve, and that your strategic assurance is what's necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. And Dave, a big piece of that is your work and the work of others that continues to tell the story on the peninsula. So I would encourage you, leave those books behind you alone and keep writing. Just keep writing. I read it every day from you, the messages that you send out. And I'm thankful for it. If I could just take just another moment, sir, just to kind of explain another thing that I find is the reason why I put the map out is so that folks can see no one in the United States military is on the Asian continent. I am. No one in the United States military is between 400 and 600, depending on how your crow flies, from Beijing right now, today. No one other than our forces, I keep saying me, I'm not going to do this by myself with an M4. No one other than our forces on the peninsula could have effects from the peninsula against the adversary in our area. I'll just say that, in the West Sea. It's just us. And if I could take one more second, Dave, I'm going to count this as your time as well. If I could take just one more second. I saw in Korean press recently where I used the words in my speech at the War College, saying that at night, from the air, Korea appears to be an aircraft carrier. And what I meant by that is, if you look at the Korean Peninsula at night from satellite photos, everything north of the JSA is absolutely pure dark. So what you have is this lit island that exists there, East Sea, West Sea, Japan, right? And that island is sitting there. There is nothing more powerful or more dangerous in terms of projecting power than an aircraft carrier. So if you had a landed aircraft carrier, by extension, you could say nothing's more powerful than that posture that we have that's sitting right there. Could you imagine if there were no peninsula, but the U.S. put an aircraft carrier where the peninsula is? That's the threat that's provided from Korea. I mean, just kind of think about that. Again, if you put out a map, take yourself a little picture of an aircraft carrier, put it over the whole peninsula and say, what would happen if we put that right there? Well, first thing that would happen is Russia would say, there's only so much we can do down there in the East Sea. If you put that there, the Chinese would say, there's so much we can do in the West Sea right now. So think about that. That's the point I was trying to get across inartfully, is to explain the power of our posture, the capabilities resident on the peninsula, the authorities that we have on the peninsula. Those things are important in our position.
Thank you, General. Don Kirk. Go ahead, Don Kirk.
Yeah, General, getting down to the specifics, you mentioned the political situation here. I'm wondering about the future prospects for joint military exercises between the U.S. and ROK, and what impact is the political situation likely to have on them? Not the previous president, but the president before the previous president was against large-scale exercises. Do you think that's likely to happen? What's your feeling about all those war games that are viewed as so necessary for the kind of defense that you talked about?
Yeah, I would ask you, sir, please. These are exercises. That's what they are. They are also experiments. They're not war games. So if I could get that out into the ether, because if you look at North Korean rhetoric, they say that we're planning to do things offensive. They don't understand that we move from consequence management to crisis management. Then at the end, when we have no choice and are compelled, it's very much like the three commands. So you have the USFK with the commitment of our forces to the peninsula and to our ally. You have the armistice, which we hope holds. We don't want war with North Korea. So what we're exercising is to ensure that we can make the decisions in space and time to forestall conflict. You never want to get to the conflict piece of this thing. So that's one thing that I would tell you. And I've got meetings today with the ROC chairman and the Joint Chiefs of Staff and all the joint staff that are going to be coming here to Humphreys today. I can't answer whether this will keep going. What I can tell you is we are preparing to exercise in August again. And we'll exercise and we'll continue to exercise. I believe this is going to go. I don't think anything's going to get in the way of it, to the point where I've invited the UN ambassadors, the member state ambassadors, to come and accompany me during consequence management. Because the message needs to get out that we are not practicing fighting anybody. What we're trying to do is ensure that we can manage crisis before it gets to be something that we can't move back from. The intent for all military forces, I think, is forestall conflict. We don't want conflict. We want peace. And the only way to get at that is to ensure that we're ready, honed to a knife's edge, so that we don't have miscalculation. And that's really what the exercise provides for us. It provides an opportunity for the chairman and I to understand one another's tactical, operational, and strategic voices, and for our staffs to understand the same, that we might stay in close alignment. And the only way partnerships work, we knew this a long time ago in the Army. There was this thing called Reforger. The only reason we did that thing was so that people could tromp across Europe? No, it was so that the allies could come together, test concept, experiment, and try out new equipment to ensure that we could defend what we said we would, so that we could meet our obligations. So, sir, in short, we're going to exercise. We're having a meeting today again with the chairman and myself to go over our training objectives, and we plan to continue to exercise.
General Walter Sharp.
Thanks. Thank you, sir.
Hey, X, good evening. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for being
Hey,
on.
boss, how are you?
Good, good. I just wanted to follow up on your comments about how good, we are positioned in the region to be able to deter and defeat if absolutely necessary. But, and as you are doing is to expand that not just to our positioning, but positioning of us as an alliance with South Korea and us regionally with the growing cooperation, the growing sharing, the growing capability with Japan. And if you look at it from a perspective of Combined Forces Command, mostly bilateral, but United Nations Command with 18 nations and all, it seems to me that, and put on top of that, the willingness and the history of South Korea being willing to go and help defend freedom and liberty and human rights around the world in Iraq, Afghanistan, Vietnam, UN peacekeeping missions, that where you sit in your triad is a unique position to help pull together trilaterally and multilaterally something that really could deter not just North Korea, but Russia and China too, for doing things in the, out in the Pacific in your AOR up there. I guess my question and thought is, how willing are both, and how much have you been able to gain with South Korea and Japan specifically to be able to start talking about, okay, let's not just look at this as a U.S. and South Korea, U.S. and, all of that, but look at it from a regional perspective. And importantly, how your unique command and your hats there really are very, very powerful and could be even more powerful when you look at it from that trilateral perspective. That would seem to me would be something that would be very persuasive here in Washington, D.C. if people really understood that. But people don't understand your hats here. They never have. But I guess I'm trying to get, I'm sorry for going on, but what I'm trying to conform here is, do you see a willingness to kind of look at this more multinationally among those nations, and then how can you best, show the United States, okay, this is the real power of this command.
Thank you, Skip.
Yeah, it's great to see you again, and I so appreciate you making time for me when I was in DC last. And I'll be back there in June for the Slurf and the 4-star, and hope to get to see you face to face when I get back. I said in my study leading up to coming into command was that the assailable flank was the UN command. And why do I say that? Because of the coalition properties that exist within that command. If I tell people the number of times I've been to Japan to speak to leadership in Japan, not about CFC business or about USFK business, but to talk about UN command business, it would make their head spin. If I told folks the fact that sometimes to help folks understand that this is a U.S. command, it's not tied to the United Nations. those things have to be explained. And you're exactly correct, sir, in that it is largely misunderstood. What I've also come to believe is sort of in the Gus Pagonis, Gus Perna mode is, imbeciles talk tactics, and the PhD students and the geniuses all talk logistics. And that there is tremendous material potential that can be offered from UN Command and its member states. And so one of the things that we're looking at right now is how do I get around and continue to explain? We're writing papers. We are trying to get into think tanks. I'll head back to the Atlantic Council when I get back to DC next time, because we've got to continue to explain what this is. But I also have to message inside that the Republic of Korea government understands the importance of these allies. And that can't be written in a paper. That can't be just talked about, when I meet with the chairman or when I meet with the MINDEF. This has got to be something that has to be made absolutely crystal clear during our exercises. Because there is, as you refer, sir, tremendous things that we get out of UN Command that enable us to do the things necessary on the peninsula in both crisis as it begins and even in competition. We receive tremendous uplift by virtue of the UN SOFA.
Do you have follow-up questions, Skip?
Just a statement to add on to what you're saying. I think to be able to explain the power of the potential to have a command and forces that look not just within Korea, but regionally, that have partners you train with all the time and talk about, and should be very, very powerful and persuasive. And looking at it from a broader perspective of capability and of cost and of deterrence capability is an important thing as you come back to Washington and talk to leadership here.
Yeah, and I think to the point I made earlier about maps and the importance of maps, 17 of 18 UN Command member states can be targeted today from DPRK. And so when I look at the KTO, I think of the KTO as the capitals represented by the forces that are here. So I made a little map again during the last Freedom Shield, and I colored in where those nations were and drew some range rings around them for each of the 12 nations that sent people here, and did the math on the side of the size forces of their nations, if called. And then the capabilities that they brought in 1950, just so that we can use that as a baseline for saying, for example, Italy, you provided hospitals in 1950. How do we access the emotion and the will, the national will, to bring that back again in the event of crisis? Because I think it's important that in our conversations, we're absolutely clear and honest with what's actually going to be needed here in the event of a crisis. And to have those nations be willing to join again, that's a tremendous sweep. And sir, we got the armistice room here. I'm sure there was something similar in your headquarters. And when I show the ambassadors the books of the war dead, that's when it becomes real again. And what I hope to be able to, as we get ready for a transition in government, is to talk about how we might help these nations access now, so that the first time that they see the port of Busan isn't in crisis. It's now. And that we somehow win them into our exercises, that they're witting to the things that are absolutely necessary in accordance with the plan.
Very good. Thank you, General. Patrick Cronin. Patrick, go ahead. Patrick, unmute your button. Go ahead.
Here I am. Yes, I'm sorry.
Good. Okay.
General Brunson, thank you so much for your leadership, and I've enjoyed your testimony, your speech to Land Pact 2025, your remarks here today. I think the concern I have is the message is not shaping the American body politic. The terms of discussion that have been long-standing have changed. The fact that we have an administration that's focused on burden shifting, that's also pursuing tariffs and economic constraints on our allies, it's leading to discussion about troop reductions again, questioning extended deterrence in the future, and all of this about you're about to have a new government in South Korea on June 3rd. So I think there are two ideas that seem to me that need to be added into what you're discussing in general. And I think Dave and Walter, and Skip have both touched on this in some ways. One of them is to ensure that Washington understands that Korea is connected to the region. You've been talking about it, but they need to really understand that the cooperation that Russia is getting from North Korea and that North Korea is getting from Russia, that the fact that they have a defense pact now, again, the fact that China, which is underwriting Russia's war machine in Ukraine, is backing, tacitly at least, everything that North Korea is doing, means that these countries, even with all of their differences, are finding that they gain a lot by cooperation, and they're probing in the Trump administration's resolve, and they're going to keep probing. So the first thing is that they're cooperating more and more, and they will test America. They sense blood. The second thing is that we need to, I think, do a better job, all of us, of explaining the economic consequences of deterrence failing. You know this, we all know this, but I think what what Washington needs to hear, because they think in economic terms now, is that this is not about military subsidies. This is this is about our insurance to protect our livelihoods, to protect our jobs, our supply chains, and our economy. Anyway, I'm sorry to go on, and I'm these things, I think, General, but I'm giving you 2 points of emphasis that I think could, how North Korea connects to a wider regional threat problem, and there are opportunities there that Skip Sharp talked about in terms of working with Japan, working with others, but we also need to focus on the devastating economic consequences of potential deterrence failing if we start to pull out. Taiwan becomes one example where they talk about, of course, $10 trillion hit to the economy, for instance. It starts to put real money and numbers on why we do this, why we need you and our forces to still do this, even though South Korea is wealthy. We're all wealthy together because we have deterrence, and we're all going to be poor together if we let deterrence fail. But I'll shut up and let you maybe respond to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick.
Yeah. Hey, Patrick, thank you very much. I could only be happier with your statement had you said, General, I know you know this, as opposed to, I think you know this. So one of the illustrations I use is I like to draw a line, because I'm trying to get this article done now called the Geometry of Our Geography. And if you draw this triangle, think of this triangle that goes from the Republic of Korea to Japan, out to the Philippines, and back to the Republic of Korea. What you find unique in that geography is there are 3 mutual defense treaties, none of which can exist in a vacuum, because as we all know, if something happens in a region, it's taken up all the region. Don't even have to talk about islands or anything like that. But if you take that same triangle, and then I would ask you to draw just I guess you call it a ray cut through a triangle. Just draw something that bisects any one of those triangles, and any one of the vertexes of that triangle, and then start thinking about what from the dime fill goes through that vertex. So where does Philippine diplomacy, information, and military and economics go to? Where does Korea's? And if you bring that power out from there, what becomes readily apparent is the percentage of trade that goes through there, the routine exercises that go on, where those nations go to on exercise. How are those folks postured to defend their own places? And I think that's a great starting point for a discussion. I use it routinely with the ambassadors and ask them to do the same thing. Who are you really connected to? And if you were to draw this Venn diagram that has ASEAN, ICAS, BRICS, NATO, and you draw this and you get this shaded area in the middle of this Venn diagram, there are nations that are tied to every one of those through some way, shape, or form across Dime Field. They're tied to that. Now, here's what I'm going to tell you. I have the benefit of a many-member staff across 3 commands. I have the benefit of being able to, at times, give myself over to thought. And the responsibility is on me to ensure that I share these things out. I've spoken with Mr. Colby. I had the great opportunity to sit with OSDP. I've spoken with the Secretary of Defense. But I'm telling you, I do not have a conversation with any leader without a map in front of me. I talked to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Japan. I laid a map out. I've delivered these things, and I probably say too much because somebody's going to write the article before I get a chance to. But I throw these things out because they're absolutely critical to understand. We don't have the luxury. The Pacific is far too large for us to think in terms of one instrument of national power for any of the nations that we're involved with. Because the insidious Chinese, the nefarious Russians, and the dumbfounded DPRK, they are coming together in a thing that I said before is alliance-like. It's very much more quid pro quo until you get to the point of looking at the small print and what they've signed. And I would also encourage everybody, if you have not read the agreements, the special strategic relationship agreements between Russia, DPRK, and China and Russia, the special measures agreements, if you have not read those things, you need to read them and understand that this is a shadow of what we've done in the past. They have gone to work on learning us. And if you've read any history, you understand manifest destiny, which drove our nation a certain way. China is trying to do the same thing going the other way. And I would tell you that in the Western Hemisphere, it's absolutely dangerous. And what I think is, if you read Brooks and others who have talked about Elliot Cohen and others who have talked about grand strategy and those things that's developed in the future.
Thank you, General.
That's your question?
I knew you knew this.
Okay, very good. Changyul Lee. Changyul, go ahead.
My name is Changyul Lee. I'm reporter from the Korea Times. I am former Katusa. I served at the Camp Humphrey in 1989, long time ago. I'm very much interested in the current status of Korean Peninsula because where my father, mother, my relative, my sisters are living. And then now what I feel is it's like new Cold War. Now North Korea and China, Russia, I think they are working together, after the Russia and Ukraine war. And then I meet a lot of politicians. And then what my first question is, now North Korea has a nuclear weapon, but South Korea does not. Should South Korea deploy or develop nuclear weapon? That's number one question. Because whenever ruling party, opposition party, they come, they always debate. And then when I was at the Korean embassy in Washington, D.C., opposition, ruling party, they say, oh, my theory is right. And second, now what I know is that there are 28,500 U.S. soldiers in Korean Peninsula. And then recently, the Wall Street Journal, they said maybe U.S. gonna reduce the troops in South Korea.
And hey, let me hop in here. Let me hop on in here and answer those two questions because I'm running short on time. I got a hard backstop. Okay.
Thank you.
So first things first. Nuclear policy. The policy currently of the United States is denuclearization of the peninsula. Whether the Koreans get a nuclear weapon or not is a sovereign concern, not mine. I don't even have an opinion on that, truthfully, okay? That's not for me to decide. The Korean people will decide what the Korean people are going to do. This remains a sovereign nation, and I don't get myself involved with the politics of that, okay? That's the first thing. The second thing is there was an article in the Wall Street Journal. I've got 4 hats, truthfully. And one of the hats that I wear is the senior military officer assigned to the Republic of Korea. And in that role, my job is to speak at the behest of the chairman. The chairman has not called me and told me anything else. The chairman was not cited in that report from the Wall Street Journal. Have there been conversations about force structure? Always have been. What I would remind everybody when you read something, understand we are in the interwar years. That's where we sit right now. And these things have all happened before. But somehow we believe we're done in Iraq, Afghanistan. What do we call this period we're in now? It's the interwar years. And in the interwar years, what marks our forces is the development of new technologies. I would tell you to look at what the Army's doing with the Army Transformation Initiative and see how that's going. That's changing the force. If you look at all our forces, they are changing right now because that happens in the interwar years. No one knows how long interwar years last. There were interwar years after World War I, leading into World War II. There was a short period after World War II when we found ourselves in Korea. There was a long period of time without war, okay? Until Vietnam, rather. And then after Vietnam, there was another interwar period, which led us to Grenada and Panama and so on. So I would say all those things are up for discussion because nations and militaries do what they must in the interwar years to ensure that they're properly postured to deal with the reality of the contextual reality of the contemporary operating environment. So, no one's told me that was in the Wall Street Journal, okay? No one's talked to me about that. And as far as nuclear weapons go, the Korean people are going to make a decision on that. And I would say the best person to ask that would be whoever wins the election. They could probably give you a better answer on that than I could.
Thank you. Shaquille James. Shaquille, go ahead.
Yes, can you hear me?
Okay.
Yes, fantastic. Well, thank you, General, for spending your time with us. I just wanted to know from your perspective as a lifetime soldier, what are your thoughts on the performance of North Korean troops in Kursk?
Yeah. So Mr. James, here's what I would tell you is that if we focus on things tactical, our responses will be tactical. I think that I'll take folks up to maybe the operational and strategic level to start thinking about things that they learned by this. So what have the North Koreans learned? Well, one is they've learned how to translate strategic movement to operational maneuver. That's important. That's one of our superpowers as the United States military is we understand how to move from strategic movement to operational maneuver. We've done it in the entire history, other than maybe the Civil War, which had some strategic movements, but the Revolutionary War, where the fight was brought to us, right? But we've learned that, and that's the thing that people have learned about us is do not allow the United States to build combat power because they will immediately translate. If I look at my own experience in 2003, first time in to Iraq with the 101st, we had helicopters and we moved on big planes and we landed at an airport. We got on helicopters, we went to a camp, then we moved forward into the fight. We translated that strategic movement to operational maneuver. That's a lesson. The ubiquitous drone that's being used much in the same way. And if you look in and around Kursk, it's trench works that they're fighting in. The drone comes sort of like a tank in World War I on the Maginot Line, where if you had a tank, you could change the way that engagements were going to go. And so in short, to answer your question, I would say that there are bigger things that we ought to be looking at and understanding. The power of proxies to be used in a fight. That's a thing that I think I might derive at a strategic level from this fight. Early on, when they first got there, and we knew that they were there, and they had said, like they came out recently and said that they were there with supporting Russia on the ground. There's a lot of talk about this great experience that people are gaining. But I would also caution people on that, and I'll consider this sensitive. There have been tremendous losses there in that fight too. And, you know, the old saying, dead men tell no tales. You don't learn anything from dying. And there's nothing that's really being gained there. These are close-in engagements that are occurring. What we've got to be concerned with is what's coming back from Russia. Materiel that I spoke of earlier, that's of greater significance. That's of greater threat, is the things that they are not having to develop that are coming back into the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. DPRK is getting things that they did not have to develop, and some of which they are not paying for because it's, hey, we gave you artillery rounds and artillery pieces and soldiers, you're giving us this piece of kit.
Thank you. Steve
thank
Lee,
you,
go
sir.
ahead.
Okay, well, thank you and ICAS for putting together this really cool thing. So I work for the Korea Defense Veterans Association. Really appreciate this opportunity to be able to participate. So under the topic of Korea is an assignment of choice. You know, we can't do any of the things that we talked about here today without great American troops getting stationed in Korea. But what is so unfortunate is sometimes troops don't want to go to Korea because there is this perception that, hey, I don't want to go there. It's not going to be a great assignment. But what is even more common is after they get there, they go, wow, this is great. I actually don't want to leave. I want to come back if I do have to leave. So what are some of the things that you're discovering, General Brunson, and how are you looking to overcome this negative narrative? How is it that organizations that are all on here and people that are on here, how can we help further your narrative that's going to make Korea really an assignment of choice? Thank you.
Okay. Hey, Steve, good to see you again, and thank you for what you and KDVA do to keep us in the institutional memory of folks in the States and here in the Republic of Korea. So thank you for that. I would tell you that there's one person in my family that this was not an assignment of choice. It was an assignment of told that we're moving. My son, Josh, who's just wrapped up his 10th grade year at Humphreys High School. My son, Josh, came here kicking and screaming. He loves it here now. He works out with a gymnastics team out in Suwon, and Josh speaks very little Korean right now. He's working on it because his coaches are Korean. His teammates are Korean. And they celebrated my son as he made it to national. First of all, he qualified at regionals, in gymnastics. And then he qualified for nationals. And I'm going to brag on my son for a second. My son is 9th in the nation in his age group on the high bar, okay? I can kind of say Korea helped him do that because his coaches there helped him to get to that point. And if Korea is good enough, it's important that my family is here too. My wife and my son are here with me. But it takes time. And one of the things that we have to do, I was just at Jeju Island over Memorial Day weekend, which is beautiful. And I saw a lot of soldiers and their families down there. Korea is a dynamic, vibrant environment with tons of culture around every corner that you look at. What we have to do, though, is so that we get different stories, we have to stop people from being so insulated, Steve. Because Camp Humphreys is the land of the big PX, we like to call it, right? We have to get people off our camps, posts, and stations to see the Korean people. I find Korean people to be generous. I find them to be kind. I find them to be immensely polite. I've never in my life seen people ask me, would it be okay if I took a picture with you? You know, a lot of times soldiers will run up to me, sir, can we get a selfie? And they've already got their hand on my shoulder. But to see a Korean gentleman or a Korean lady come up and bow slightly and say, could we please get a picture with you? That doesn't happen anywhere else in the world. And we've got to start again, this goes back to even things strategic, operational, and tactical. We have to tell our story here on the peninsula better. And that's what I need help with. Let people know that. There are things that we're doing right now, like tour normalization. Why shouldn't someone who comes here accompanied be here for 3 years? We just got that over the line. Our next step is to look at 1-year tours. Why should you come here if you choose to come unaccompanied? Why should you only be here 1 year? You need to be here 2 years. Why? Because we need you to understand the culture first, understand the alliance along with that, and then understand why you're here. So to that end, my Sergeant Major is also working. If you won't go off base yourself, we're going to carry you off base. There's nothing that says in the JSA, which I administer, that I can't send soldiers up there to do a tour in the JSA. Why? Because they need to understand what was fought for. They need to understand that every one of those places where we have a GP and someone is guarding it now, someone paid for that spot. That was the best terrain available at the cessation of hostilities. There is blood in the ground that's out there. And it was fought for by patriots of both Korean, United States, and UN member states. That's paid for ground. And they need to understand what they're giving their life to. And if they don't get out in the community, they don't understand what they're being charged to protect. It's not only our homeland, but it's the Korean homeland that we're here for. So, Steve, I would tell you there are things that we're doing that are process things to increase the tour length so that we have greater exposure to our ally and the region, to be quite frank with you. And then there's things that we want to make sure that people are doing in a tour here. As you know, you very easily come to Camp Humphreys, never leave Camp Humphreys. Yes. We want to change that. We want to change that. And sometimes we allow people to just come here and sit fast. They don't know anything about the culture. They don't know anything about the place and the people. We got to change that equation significantly. And we are.
Thank you. Lee Yu-jung, go ahead.
My name is Lee Yu-jung from 중앙일보, a newspaper based in Seoul. And thank you, General, for your insightful remarks. And General, you mentioned about the importance of alliances adapting to future challenges. And I'd like to ask you a question about the evolving dynamics in Taiwan Strait. Even though you said you don't want to see a conflict in this region, if a military confrontation or a clash in this region really occurs after the year of 2027, what kind of support or involvement would the United States hope to see from its regional allies, such as South Korea, Japan, Philippines as well? Could you elaborate your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'm just going to talk about my job. I'm going to talk about my job. And then all I can talk about in regard to that. I would tell you that prudent folks plan. And my plan is to be available to do those things that my nation and the nation that I find myself living in need me to do in the event of conflict. I can't speak for any other nation or any other units than mine. What I believe I need to do is to ensure that across warfighting functions, I am prepared to stand and hold with what I have here on the peninsula currently. Should other missions be given, then I will do those things that I've been ordered to do. And I'm going to leave that at that.
Any follow-up question, Yu-jung?
Oh, no, thanks. Yeah.
All right, Hee-jae, one more question.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, General Brunson, for your time and sharing insights. My name is Hee-jae Jung. I'm an undergraduate student from Azusa Pacific University. It is an honor to ask you a question. My question is, to what extent is President Trump committed to strengthening the trilateral partnership between the United States, South Korea, and Japan? Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know. You'd have to ask the president that question. So I will tell you what I'm doing, okay? Is that fair?
Yes.
Yeah. Not a politician, and I'm not the president. He's my commander in chief. What I am doing to further the trilateral cooperation is everything that I mentioned in my opening remarks is, number one, we have to ensure that we can share data as it relates to missiles, okay? And we share that with the Japanese freely, ROC, US, Japan, to ensure that we can protect ourselves both on the peninsula and within Japan. We are currently exercising in both the East and West Seas of Korea with our air forces. We've got buddy team training that's coming up soon, which allows ROC pilots and US pilots to fly along with Japanese pilots so that we can understand how to coordinate with one another. That strengthens the alliance. 2 weeks ago, a week ago actually, yeah, a week ago I was in Japan because as a commander of UN Command, I exercised a UN Command Status of Forces agreement with Japan that includes 7 installations within Japan. Okay? And so for us to be interoperable is absolutely important. There's only 2 nations in Northeast Asia that are freedom-loving people in democracies. That's the Republic of Korea and Japan. And so it's important that we continue to have this dialogue. I sat and had a meeting a week ago with General Yoshida, who's the Chief of Defense of Japan. And I'm heading off to the Shangri-La dialogues. All those things further our trilateral relationship, but the base of that trilateral relationship is our ability to be interoperable, our ability to train together, and our ability to understand one another's capabilities.
Very good. Thank you, Xavier. The most important question, then that will be the end of this session. General, do you hear me, General?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Do you recall or remember the spot where you gave your wife a ring when you dated her?
Yes, I do.
That's most important question to you.
Yeah, and if anybody cares to know,
Yes.
I'm from Fayetteville, North Carolina, the Fort Bragg area, and I was born at Womack Army Hospital. And one of the places that I always loved in town in the springtime was over at Fayetteville Technical Community College. There's a rose garden there. And I brought my wife there to the rose garden, and I sat down on the bench with her, and I had a photographer out there and everything. And she said, "Are you going to propose to me now?" And at that point in time, I just said, "Hey, man, just take the picture because this woman's already figured this out." And those of you who don't know, my wife is a retired Army judge. She sat on the bench for about 5 years before she retired. And she's way smarter than I am. And she had figured out why I brought her to the Rose Garden. So yes, I gave my wife her ring as we sat side by side. I got up off of my knee because she had already figured everything out. I gave her the ring there at the Fayetteville Technical Community College Rose Garden.
Old Rose Garden, to be more correct. Old Rose Garden, right, Xavier?
Yes, sir.
So you passed today, and this is wonderful. You are the best speaker we had. Thank you very much, Xavier.
I don't know about that, but thank you all for your time and your attention. And I hope to see you all when I get back to the in June. It'd be nice to have a conversation face to face if we could arrange that. I'd be more than willing to do that and see that as a great opportunity. I just want to say, if I could on the way out, my job is the commander of the Tri-Commands. There are some questions that I know that you all have that are burning, that are either policy issues, which I don't do policy, or they're political issues, and I don't do that. Or will I talk about things that I believe would violate the security classification of where we sit today. but know that I appreciate the questions. There are things that we'll look at and find other ways to answer clearly and plainly. But I'm most assuredly thankful for the opportunity that you've given me today, and would ask that you all help us to go tell our story. So thank you so much, sir. I appreciate it.
Thank you, General. This is wonderful, and we'll get back to you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Y'all have a good day.
Give him the film.
Take care.
Thank you.